That's not fair. All right, it says we are live. There's always about a 30-second to 20-minute delay. But hey guys, thanks for tuning in to my regular Wednesday night live stream. I think it's important to mention that once again, I was a very, very bad host because I told Aleksandr 2:30 and it's actually 1:30, and I'm a very disorganized young lady, but he's very humble and he's still a very bad host. He still came on, so thank you very much.
So, nice to see you.
Thank you. And we were having a very nice chat off camera. He speaks Spanish, so don't worry, everyone. We're gonna do it in English today, but he speaks Spanish, and I thought that was pretty cool. Do you want to maybe move the light a little bit further away from your face? Just further back.
I have no light. A little bit maybe like that. Like that.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Better.
Oh, yeah, that's better. Yeah, beautiful. All right, well, I have a lot of questions that I've researched, and so I hope you're ready. I'm very pleased that you're here. You're my first Russian. All right, let's get the questions. Okay, what are your thoughts on the Western world and how divided we are? Left versus right is so prominent in the culture, in the media. What are your thoughts on that?
I think that according to my analysis, the division between right and left in the politics and the culture and the society belongs to the past. That does not correspond to the real political confrontations, positions, and problems. So I share analysis of my friend, French philosopher Alain de Benoit,
yes,
who started from many years ago, started to attract our attention to the fact that this division between left and right doesn't correspond anymore to the real problems we are facing with. So my idea, and I follow in that analysis of Alain de Benoit and many others, that now the problem is quite different. That is the political elite that is liberal, or whether left liberal or right liberal, against the the people who is not neither right nor left. The people is the majority, and that is not liberal in that self. So there is idea that it could be illiberal from the right, in favor of tradition, identity, and so on, or illiberal from the left, trying to insist on the social justice. So there is two forms in the people of illiberal reaction against the rule of the liberal elites, and there are two opposition. One pole, it is right-left liberalism, that is the position of the elite, and there is right-left illiberalism, that is the common position of the masses, of the people, of the societies. And there is not right against left, because elites are both right and left, and the people is both right and left, and these two positions, to be right and to be left, are merged in both cases. So that creates totally different political structure. The center against the periphery, the elite against the masses, and not a left against right. So, but in order to conserve the rule and the control of societies, the ruling elites tries to still to keep this division of the society on left and right artificially. So that is why they try to demonize populism as or far right or far left tendencies, but the populism is neither far right, nor left, nor far left. So that is a new field of political battle. Elites against the societies, and the problem is that in the West, as well in the East, partly, this conflict obtains more and more radicality. So the countries, the political system, are divided by this new front line. The elites, the new elites, don't represent anymore nothing from the society. They represent themselves, and they're our own agenda that is becoming less and less democratic. So the liberalism turns more and more anti-democratic. Elites follow their own agenda, not taking into consideration the real demands of the society. That's create totally new problematic political. So the liberalism turns totalitarian. Less and less liberal. So that is inner contradiction of the liberalism that becomes more and more totalitarian openly. That is new kind of totalitarianism of the liberal elites directed against the masses. And the masses are blamed to be irresponsible, far leftist, demanding social justice, or to incline to share some far right prejudices. That is totally wrong. The masses, or better, the peoples, they have their own political agenda, and they try to define this agenda outside of the rule imposed from above.
I would like to touch on your thoughts of left and right, and does that exist in Russia? Because I've been to Russia, you probably saw my thumbnail, and I loved it, but I don't believe that the same issues here in Australia or even in the United States parallel the issues in your country. Or am I wrong? Is there left and right? Is there abortion versus non-abortion? Is there race versus race? Is there fat versus skinny, gay versus straight? Does that exist in Russia?
No, I don't think so. I don't think so. That our communism was not so much left communism. That was a kind of national Bolshevism already. So the right and left, the kind of patriotism, some kind of statist mentality was present side of the communist time. So Russian politics should be interpreted in the situation of the Russian culture and Russian society. So we never had a pure form of left and right in our history. Our left was marked by some national elements, and our right was never liberal. That is different. So we had no right liberals in Russia, never. And now left and right, I think, simply don't exist in present day Russia. But at the same time, nevertheless, we have some tension between elites and the people. But interesting, in our situation, we have a very special structure. We have more or less pro-liberal, pro-Western elite that are the part of the global elite of globalists. We have the people that is against such kind of elite, and on the top of this elite we have Putin, who is much more closer to the people than to elites. So it is a very specific, very special, very original political situation when we have the head of the state and the people on the side of this populism, and we have elite that is mostly as in other countries, so liberal, globalist, and so on. And there is very special structure, because it is not right and left, but more complicated. We have two kind of populism on the very top of the society, as more or less populist figure as Vladimir Putin as president with huge power, but at the same time around him personally, all is liberal elites, almost all, and on the bottom there is the huge populist masses. So there is very complicated politics where we could not find neither left nor right, but contradiction, politically contradiction that is characteristic for the other countries still is present. So it is, I think now it is almost universal. So we see something like that, including in the China at lesser scale. So in all countries now there is tensions between elites, more or less liberal, and peoples who are not liberal at all. So that is kind of divorce, a kind of between power and the society, and this abyss is growing. This desert is growing, as Nietzsche said. The desert between the abyss between the ruling elites and the society, and we are not exception from this rule, but we have no left, neither left nor right, duly presented, and that is just our particularity historically. We could explain that historically.
I think it's very fantastic that you don't have left versus right, because it's, you said you saw my video. I'm trying to move beyond it and just look at things as wrong and right. I think that's easier. And that's my opinion. Do you subscribe to that opinion?
So I think it's maybe it's a kind of simplification, right? Good, but I think that we could speak about autonomous logic of liberal elites. Autonomous logic that has nothing to do that has nothing to do with the logic of the societies, and this opposition is growing. If we and Gramsci, Antonio Gramsci, leftist author, has said that any intellectual should make a pact, historical pact, whether with dominant elites or with the people. So we, as intellectuals, should define which cause we are ready to serve. So I think that we need, it's my personal decision to make the pact with the people. So I'm on the side of the people, and for myself as for you, the good is the inside of society, in the people, and the bad or wrong is on the side of elite, of liberalism. So liberalism is wrong because it is anti-human, anti-social.
Yeah, I love that.
I discover this particularity of liberal ideology not only in the present day. In present day, it is manifest. It's clear. This so-called aristocratic, elitist aspect of liberalism now is manifest, is clear. But if we search deeper, we could find the origin of that in the beginning of the liberal ideology. Because, for example, Spencer Herbert Spencer, one of the greatest ideologists of liberalism, or John Stuart Mill, they were pure racist, elitist racist, and social Darwinists. So the liberalism in the origin already was this totalitarian, racist concept that now has become obvious. And so liberalism, it is not about the people, not about the society, not about the justice. It about the fight for the survival of the fittest. It is pure Nazi concept, liberalism. So, and that is not by the chance that today all elites in the world, through the world, with few exception, embrace this liberalism, because it is the doctrine, that the concept that explains to them their capacity and necessity to rule. So that is a kind of manifest destiny for them, and that contradicts. That is quite opposite for the demands of social justice or cultural identity. So I think you are right that we should go beyond left and right. Absolutely. But we could take from the left this claim for social justice, and we can take from the right identity or tradition or conservatism of the traditional values. So that will be not new ideology, that will be the logical and spontaneous demand of the people to organize the life, social life, basing on the inherent principles, not imposed by these anti-human liberal elites. That is my opinion, and that is why I am called by liberals most dangerous philosopher in the world.
Yes, it's stupid. There was already actually the newspaper had seen that I was going to interview. Like, oh, dear Beltran is going to interview this dangerous person. Like, shut up.
Most dangerous. They say most dangerous, not only simply dangerous. Most
you don't seem dangerous. I think I could give you a hug and you'd be like a big teddy bear.
So, but to speak seriously, why I'm first of all to think and to occupy with philosophy, to do philosophy is dangerous. And Heidegger
shouldn't be.
It should be, because when you think freely, you have no support from some established dogmas. So you can think wrong, you can make the wrong decision, and you should be responsible for that. So all free thought is essentially dangerous on one hand. On the other hand, I think the liberals call me the most dangerous philosopher in the world precisely because I'm trying to create a fourth political theory that is anti-liberal, but outside of traditional left and right, outside of the communism and fascism. So I have developed fourth political theory.
I was about to ask you that. This is my question. The first political theory is liberal democracy, the second is Marxism, and the third is fascism. But it appears that neither has ever been overall successful. So how is your concept of the fourth political theory different, and why have you come up with it? See, that was my next question. Go ahead.
Okay. So that is, I've already started to explain a little bit. So I think that political modernity has developed three political way of thought, and political modernity in the West has established in the practice three form of government basing on liberalism, historically successful, and that has won finally at the end of the previous century. Second political theory, Marxism, as well, somehow successful in Soviet Union and China, and but that has lost the battle with the capitalism at the end of the 20th century. And third political theory, and European fascism and national socialism, that was as well for time being successful, and Nazi Germany has managed to control and to conquer almost all Europe, and but has lost the battle against communism and liberalism. And now we are living under the full scale dominance of the liberalism. So that is ideological dominance of liberalism. That is the kind of result of all these three political theory fighting against each other during the modernity. That is the point of transition from the modernity toward the post-modernity, and that is made under the domination of the liberalism. And what if we don't like liberalism, if we don't agree with liberalism, not only in the practical aspect, but if we don't accept that as the something that satisfies us as well theoretically, so we are immediately will be put in the camp of the or whether Nazis or communist, and that is how liberal logic expressed in the book of Karl Popper, one of the most important writer of modern neoliberalism. He has said, open society and its enemies. So everybody who is against liberalism, against open society, is considered to be enemy of liberalism and is qualified whether communist or fascist. But if we, who are against liberalism, could not find our position, our agreement, neither with communism, second political theory, nor with fascism, or third political theory, so we need something outside, beyond all of them. So we need fourth political theory. That is my main idea, that being against liberalism, we should not fall into the trap of the previous two political theories of the modernity. Just because, for example, in my own case, I am against materialism and atheism of Marxism and socialism.
Atheism? Did you say atheism?
Atheism.
So no religion. No religion.
I'm against that. I am against Marxist materialism and Marxist and socialist atheism. Atheism.
That's good. Yeah.
Because I am believer, I'm Christian, and I believe in the sacred values.
Yeah.
On the other side, I am against nationalism, and I am radically against all kind of racism. Because in all my writings, I am defending the particularity of the different kind of society. So we need to accept as human all kind of society, developed or primitive, all kind, and we should treat as human not only the highly complicated society as the Western one, but as well we need to accept on the full scale, on the full equality, the different society, Asian, African, Latin America. So we need to accept plurality of the human civilizations, and that goes against all kind of racism or nationalism. So my opinion is that why we need fourth political theory. We need to confront, to fight against this liberal totalitarianism, but not from on the position of the traditional far left, communist, or far right. But liberals, they have no place for that. They have no name for that. And they try to demonize this forced political theory. They insist that is a kind of fascism, but that is disguised fascism. It is masked by or something like that, or communism or Stalinism. They have no territory, theoretical territory for that, and they continue to demonize, to try to put in the already known places this forced political theory. But forced political theory is neither communism nor fascism, and that is so essential for that, as it's an open anti-liberal orientation. So forced political theory is invitation to criticize liberalism outside of the communism and fascism. And for example, I'm brave enough, if for example I would be fascist, I would confess that without any problem, but I am not fascist. I am of political for forced political theory, not by convention or political correctness. I am not fascist because of my convictions, of my beliefs, because I reject all kind of racism and nationalism, and they are essential to fascist ideology. Not because of my political correctness, once more, but because of my natural defense of the plurality of the culture. That is my inner belief. And I think that forced political theory should be based on the recognition of the plurality in a positive way of the peoples, of the cultures, of the societies, and we should accept, including the tribes, very primitive tribes, as full-scale human society, not trying to develop them, to impose on them our values. That is the nice film. Or globalization or progressism. So there is a very nice film of Werner Herzog, German director, about Australia, about Aborigines people there, where Green Ants Dream, that is called. So very, very nice film about how rich, deep, and beautiful is the world vision of traditional Aborigine or traditional Australian tribes, and how perverted, stupid, and racist is Anglo-Saxon civilization brought here by the force and the violence. So I think that defense, we Russians, we are suffering this demonization from the West. The West say, oh, those Russians, they are not like us, they are worse. That is the everyday racism we are dealing with during all our history. We are different, but we are not worse. We just different. We're not better, neither better, not worse. But we are,
okay.
So neither better than the other, nor worse. And this experience to defend Russian identity has led me to defend all kind of identities. All kind, not only Russian as well. I am against all kind of xenophobic, chauvinistic attitudes, against all kind of racism, not only biological, but cultural racism or technological racism, or epistemological racism that is dealing with some universal, presumably universal set of values. There is nothing in the humanity universal, I think. So when we are searching our way to absolute inside of our cultures, not outside, so not beyond them. So I think more we are Russian, more we can understand the other, more we are conscious about our own identity, more we are inclined to accept and to the values of the other, and to accept their meaning, their richness, and their dignity.
So, hang on. You said that you believe that Russia is not worse or not better, but different. And so you believe that people who live in the Amazon rainforest or something, you believe that their culture isn't better or worse, but just different?
Absolutely, absolutely, and not neither better.
It is worse because they're burying their babies in the dirt. That, you know what I mean? Like, they're doing things that they shouldn't be doing.
But
because it's human life.
Yes, I am against human rights.
Against human rights?
I am against human rights because it's racist concept. If we don't like something, I'm explaining. If we don't like something, if we don't like something that doesn't, or if some practice is not traditional or is judged to be negative or unacceptable in our society, we couldn't project the same attitude on the other culture. They could judge that quite acceptable. So we are judging the other by ourselves. And the West, liberal West, modern West, has created the concept of the human rights basing on the values of the modern Western liberal society. Human is considered to be like modern Western liberal society. That is human. That is pure racist attitude. If we if we meet outside of the Western civilization something that we don't like, something that is different from what we believe is good and has dignity, we try to improve that. We try to impose on the other our own truth, and that is epistemological colonization. That is the liberal racism, and I am against that. So I am in favor of all kind of political society with all the practices that exist, and we should not, for example, for us Russians, Catholicism or Protestantism seem to be perverted form of Christianity. If we insist on them, we will be imperialist, we will intolerant, aggressive, and chauvinist. But it is for us, for example, it is. But we need to accept the other as other. Maybe it goes against our preferences, against our norms, and against our beliefs. But being different doesn't mean that should be improved or exterminated. So that is a kind of colonial and imperialist attitude embedded in this kind of universalism. So I am against all kind of universalism. If the tribes of rainforest think it is better to deal with their babies as they do, that is up to them to decide what is good and what is bad for them. We should try as anthropologists we should try to understand what they are doing, why they are doing so, what is the pattern, what is the logic, their own logic, not ours, of their behavior. So that is my deep opinion that all human beings can create their cultures or without any regard to the other. So for example, if they will try to deal this in the same way with our babies, we should legitimately protest against that, and that is our right. But we should not. Yes, it is a kind of consequent pluralism and multipolarity, because I am as well the author of the theory of multipolar worlds that is accepted more or less by our president, Mr. Putin, and by China, for example, and by many others. So multipolarity should be based on this recognition of dignity of any human society without some abstract model to judge them: developed, underdeveloped, humanitarian, non-humanitarian. So human rights, a theory of human rights is possible, but only if we ask all existing societies. So it should be the result of the huge dialogue, not of the projection of our values on others. So that will be colonialism and imperialism.
I understand what you're saying. The problem with what, for me, as a Christian, as someone who is pro-life, someone who loves babies, I think we need to protest in general if a baby or a 4-year-old is in trouble. So I don't think I agree with you there, because there is objective morality. It comes from the Bible, and I understand that not every culture applies that, but it doesn't matter that the other cultures apply that. God, if you're a Christian, you believe that objective morality exists, and so even though it doesn't apply to that tribe, what they're doing is still wrong, whether they realize it or not. Don't you think, as a Russian Orthodox Christian?
I think that objective morality is cultural concept. So there is objective morality, but it is limited by the culture where this objective and subjective forms exist. So I have developed a special theory, philosophical theory of relative absolute. So I believe in absolute, and I strongly believe that my Christian faith, my Orthodox Church, has in possession of absolute truth. But if I would like to project this objective absolute truth on Catholics or on Protestant, the only thing that I would like, or to convert them into the Christianity, or to regard them as totally wrong people. So that will create, so for myself, all the Protestantism and Catholicism are the very dark heresies. But if I try to base the behavior, the rules of conduct with the Protestant and Catholics, for example, basing of recognition of this my own objective truth, I would not speak the way I am speaking with you, because you are Protestant, like that, in the friendly and open manner, trying to understand your position, trying to respect you. I would immediately start to convert you Orthodox objective truths. We do the same as the Western civilization.
Yeah, I would be open to hearing it. Yeah.
So we do the same, we use the same normativist, prescriptive, and a little bit nationalist and racist practices, trying to promote our values as objective. So there is the kind of contradiction between objective values and what we think objective values are. So we need to start to make a difference between what is really objective, and that is philosophical question. So I think for the time being, we should accept multiplicity, multipolarity, and plurality of human society, trying to not judge them, but conserving our objective and absolute truth in some, I would say, in the natural borders, so the natural boundaries. So the problem of the border, of the boundary, is essential, I think, in the concept of culture. So when we are coming from one culture to the other culture, we are coming from one objective world to the other. The human society, civilizations are the worlds, and we need, in entering the new world, we are accepting as universal or objective the truth of this world, new world for us. It is adoption. You have told me before we started is broadcasting how your family Catholic and Latin has changed identity, changed objective belief, objective truth, or objective value from Catholicism coming to Australia, accepting this Protestant Christianity as normative in some way, and starting to criticize Catholicism. It is normal. It is adoption process. So we adopt as something objective the rules of or the set of values of the society we want to be assimilated in. So I think it is completely normal, but we need to understand how it works. It's just a process. So if the value of or the truth would be really objective, so it wouldn't depend on this transgressing the boundaries of the cultures. Or we should say that the reality or the last truth is the truth of the society we are living in now, not before. So it is complete relativism. So it's better to acknowledge some relativity, not trying to consciously harmonize it with our strong and deep belief, instead of naively pretending that the society we identify ourselves with is the real possessor of the objective truth. It is so, but it's a little bit naive and uncritical. So I think that if you have, for example, if I would change the faith or the church, for me it would be the change toward the truth, but it was just relative act that couldn't change the reality and metaphysical reality of my orthodox faith. So that is the basis for theory of multipolar world and first political theory. It is against liberalism, in favor of traditional roots of the society, in favor of deep identity and social justice as well, but not insisting on the hierarchy of these societies. So liberalism, it is really hierarchy, is based on hierarchy, but hierarchy of the liberalism is purely economic. And that leads to all kind of perversion, of abortion, of this gender politics. That is mass destruction of the humanity. So and liberalism is going more and more anti-human. I think that's post-humanism is the last step in that direction.
I agree with that. This is a little bit off topic, but I was curious. Do you believe that if the Romanov family had not been murdered, that you would see a very different Russia today and it would be better today?
No, I don't think that is so direct. So Romanov, the last Tsar, was a very bad politician. He has lost everything that he could. He is considered as the saint in my church. So I wouldn't say the bad thing about him. But judging him from political point of view, he has made all the mistakes he shouldn't. He has made everything to destroy the empire, Russian Empire, and the result was logical. If you try to destroy everything, so finally you shouldn't be astonished that when something fall apart. But I think that Russian monarchism, the Romanovs, from the beginning, were newly elected dynasty, popularly elected dynasty, but that was based on the great catastrophe in our history of the end of the Rurik dynasty. That was the first dynasty.
I have a Russian documentary on all the Tsars. Sorry, keep going.
Great.
Yeah.
So Rurik dynasty was traditional one, and Romanov was elected. That was something different. And with them started modernization of our society, and I think that was very bad. Somehow, in 19th century, some Romanovs, Alexander I, Nikolai I, Alexander second as well, and third above all, they tried to adjust modernization to the Russian tradition, to some ancient principles, but they didn't finish this conservative revolution, and there was the many mistakes gathered together to the time of Nikolai II, and he didn't solve anything in that. And interesting that in Soviet time we see the same monarchism, but in the case of Stalin or in communism. So the monarchism, it is not so much imposed from above in our society. It is demanded from below, from the bottom. We have bottom-centered monarchism. It is our society that wants to monarchy, wants the paternalist state, and our Tsars were a kind of responses, answers to this demand. So we can see in the Soviet time how the figure of such communists, such materialists, such atheists as Stalin become as well the figure of the Red Tsar. So that is the kind of popular monarchism, and the same with something like that we see now with Putin. He is authoritarian, not by himself. He is very shy as person. He's very humble, I would say, personally. Okay. But our people project on him this demand for the strong leader, for Tsar. So we have some kind of monarchy that is outside of dynasty. And I think that the cult of the Tsar that is promoted by church is not too much accepted by our population. So now we see in the present day Russia, Stalin is much more a Tsarist figure than last Romanov. So that is paradoxal, because the Tsar is less Tsar than anti-Tsar, because we are judging, not myself, but I'm speaking about the majority of the population. They consider the greatness in Stalin, and they see the weakness in the Nikolai II. So, but we have a kind of magical monarchy concept. So, if the Tsar is right one, he should be powerful. He should expand our empire to make it glorious, the powerful. And to fight against the Western Antichrist. That did Stalin.
Who's the Western Antichrist?
So, in the eyes of the Christian Orthodox fundamentalists, the West modernity, the Western modernity, the Western modern enlightenment and liberal and materialist atheist world is representation of Antichrist. Before it was just the heresy. So Western Antichrist is the West, the common figure for the West. And Stalin, in that sense, is considered to be more sacred Tsar than Nikolai II. That is the paradoxal. I could not judge that. I'm just trying to explain, to give.
No, I understand.
correct picture about our society, because it isn't understood, as long as I know, too much by the West, because we played Russians played more or less the same figure of the some Asian threat to the West, something like the figure of the other dangerous, barbaric, and uncultured, and we are sharing the negative images, the Western culture and Russian culture, but majority of the Western people naturally follows the classical for the West attitude toward Russia, and majority of the Russians pay the same price, pay the same vision for the West. So, in our opinion, the Tsar should be strong and powerful, and that makes him sacred, not just the decision of to recognize his suffering or his martyrdom.
Yeah. What are your views on capitalism and nationalism?
Capitalism and nationalism.
Yeah.
So I think that
because you spoke about fascism already, and you spoke about communism already, but I haven't asked you first. Yeah.
Capitalism, I think that is precisely like the same as liberalism. I think that capitalism is economical system, and liberalism is ideology of this capitalism. So the most consequent, most coherent expression of the economical capitalism is precisely liberalism, because liberalism that Max Weber has shown very clear that capitalism and liberalism were born from the secularization of the Protestants' individualism, and what is in the main figure of the capitalist economy, that is the individual making his own or her own enterprises, and the liberalism as the ideological philosophy, the theoretical basis for this economical practice. So liberalism and capitalism, in my opinion, starting from the Adam Smith or from John Locke, they is not two parallel things, but that is one and the same phenomenon seen from the whether ideological or economical side. So liberalism in economy is capitalism. Liberalism in politics is progressism, we could call it.
Progressivism. Yeah.
Progressivism. So I think that liberalism and capitalism.
And what about the Nazbolism? Like
National Bolshevism, Nazbol. National Bolshevism.
Yeah.
That was my early idea for 30 years ago. I have discovered that we need to oppose to the liberalism neither fascism nor socialism or Bolshevism, but a kind of mixture of this ideology, trying to separate fascism and nationalism from xenophobic racist aspect, and separate socialism from materialist and atheist aspect, trying unite social justice with the traditional identity. But that was the first approach to elaboration of forced political theory. After I have revised this attitude, I have rejected this a little bit mechanical combination of the parts of the nationalism with socialism, with the common denominator as anti-liberalism, and I have chosen not to speak anymore about communism and fascism, to reject them and not to mix them, to overcome all three political theory, and that was the difference between national Bolshevism and fourth political theory. But national Bolshevism, in my opinion, was a kind of preliminary stage of elaboration of fourth political theory that I could not defend anymore, because in all kind of communism and fascism, there are too many elements of modernity. They represent political modernity of the West, and we need to overcome all kinds of Western centric ideology in order to give the possibility to all societies to develop their own political program.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. What about Eurasianism? You're quite famous for being a Eurasianist, but I don't know if a lot of people really understand this concept. Do you want to explain it a little bit?
Eurasianism, that was philosophy developed by the Russian white immigrants in the Europe after the First World War and our Civil War, and they have remarked that we could not compare Russian Empire and Russian society with one of the European country with domination of the Russian nation. That was wrong, because we had totally different identity that was much more identity not of the state but of civilization, and Russian people was only part, maybe central, a major part, but only part of this group of the ethnic tradition and cultures that were united in our history. So Eurasianists, first Eurasianists, they have promoted the concept of Russia as Eurasia. Russia as Eurasia is the great space. It is civilization rather than country. It is not nation, because Russians are just part of this group of different ethnic and national groups, and this civilization is not the part of European modernity. It has its own destiny, Eurasian destiny, linked to the space, linked to the particularity of Russian civilization and our history. So that was early Eurasianism, and I have developed and I have applied these principles to the concrete politics starting from the late 80s. And I propose to instead of destroying Soviet Union, I have proposed, as the early Eurasianists did, to transform Soviet Union into Eurasian Union, by restoring religious, traditional, sacred aspects, but conserving as well social justice and social institutes as paternalist model. And that was my idea, and after that I have developed more and more this approach. I have added geopolitical vision that coincided very well to this, the ideas of Carl Schmitt and the politics and the geopolitics, and speaking about Eurasia as continentalism. And finally, I have developed on the basis of the Eurasianism that is accepted as well by Putin. Putin has put in the practice many concepts of Eurasianism. He has declared creating of Eurasian Union now. So we are living in Eurasian Union because there is the kind of cooperation between other post-Soviet countries. And interesting that Eurasianism was one of the main principles of elaboration of the theory of multipolar world. So that is not a bipolar world, but that is the multipolar world where all the countries, all the poles, better to say, all the poles are considered to be different civilizations. So Russia as civilization is taken here as the model for the organization of the whole humanity. So, for example, Indian civilization, not only country or nation, Chinese civilization, Islamic civilization, European civilization, Latin American civilization, African civilization should be a kind of different Eurasias. So Eurasianism, it is idea that in Russian as well, in Russian civilization, we have Western and Eastern elements, and that is a kind of mixture or synthesis of the cultures, and we need to recognize the same possibility to organize the big space on the civilizational basis for other. So it is from this Eurasianism is one step to the theory of multipolar world.
Oh, okay, that's really interesting. I wanted to ask you before, guys, you can start asking your questions, and then if they're okay questions, I'll put them up on the screen. I was curious about like your thoughts on collectivism and individualism, or not. Are they mutually exclusive? How do you view that?
I am decisively anti-individualist. I think that.
Oh wow! I did not expect you to say that. Really? Okay.
Yes. I think that collective identity is prevailing in all of us. So we are using the language as collective tool. We are using the values. Everything that is really that has real value is something that don't belong only to us, that we share with others. So, but I am not in favor of the quantitative collectivism and as in socialism. I am in favor of a qualitative collectivism when we are speaking about organic community. So it is not on the way of confusion or mixture of the individuals are in artificially created kind of society. I think that is the modern concept, but I'm in favor of conservation of traditional natural community when the people are sharing the same world vision that is the basis of their collective identity. So when and I consider the normal organization of the world precisely as this communication system or network of organic community, and everywhere should prevail this collective identity that is the basis of their individual development. So that is the ground, the common ground for individual development. When we separate the individual from this organic community, we kill all the content. That is the pure and void concept. It is not the reality. The reality, human reality, is only collective in the sense of Gemeinschaft, on community, not society, neither nor Gesellschaft. There are two German terms: community and society. I'm in favor of common identity of community, and not in favor of the artificial association of individual as in society.
I know what you're trying to say. You have to separate the two things. Yes. Benjamin, what are Aleksandr's views on biblical end times? That's a good question. What do you think about the end times?
Because I am a Christian, Orthodox Christian, practicing person, so I strongly believe we are living in a moment of the end time. We could not measure by ourselves in which stage of this end time we are living in, but certainly we are living inside of the one of the very advanced stage. So when the Western civilization has destroyed, has killed, as Nietzsche has said, God, when the West began to create the new kind of culture and society basing on materialism, on individualism, that was the end of approaching Antichrist. And I think that the modernity is a kind of phenomenon of this manifestation of Antichrist, but I
It
could
is.
not judge what concrete stage we are living in. There is a kind of the limitation of the human possibility to make the final judgment about that. That is the kind of mystery and secret. But we should live in the world, in the time, in the history, as and the end of time, including when there is no such near event. So we need to consider the end of time as something so real that better to think it is already here than to imagine that will never come. So
I agree with that.
better to make a mistake in the close relation to end of time than to forget that totally. So that is my opinion. So we are living in the end of time, and we are participants in the end battle.
It's a scary thought. Someone wants me to ask you, I don't know what this means. Intermarium. I don't know what that is.
Yes, that is a concept of the Eastern European nationalists directed against Russia in order to create a kind of zone, sanitarian cordon between Baltic Sea to the Black Sea in order to separate Russia from Europe. That is the globalist geopolitical concept that is fueled by small little nationalisms of Eastern European neo-Nazis. So I am logically against that, because I am in favor of the creation of the great space and the cooperation between Russia and continentalist Europe.
Okay, SD wants to know, what do you perceive to be the strongest counter-initiatory, anti-traditional telluric currents prevailing today? I don't know what any of that means.
I see perfectly what it's all about. So counter-initiation, it is the term of René Guénon. I am a follower of the traditionalist author René Guénon, who has said that now we're living under a kind of anti-secret influence of the global government that is following satanic agenda. That is more or less. The question is about who are the candidate to be the most dangerous from all these counter-initiatory groups. I think that liberals. So we should not search the conspiracies or hidden lodges or satanic groups, because they are in front of us. Soros, Bill Gates, Zuckerberg. The manuals of modern physics or modern economics or liberal gender studies, all that is counter-initiatory literature. All these figures are operating openly in front of us. So we should not search for them in the exotic spaces. They are in front of us. The most satanic thing that we could have, it is liberalism, represented politically, economically, epistemologically, in education and society, and it is open Antichrist. And when we try to find something behind, something hidden, we are diverting, we are deviating from the real struggle. So there is nothing more toxic than liberalism and globalization, and that is the real counter-initiation under our eyes, not hidden, today open. So I think that conspiracy theory, they just try to deviate our attention against the real problem, and we need to study with rational instruments and tool the genesis of the liberalism of political modernity that is prevailing evil, and
No, I agree. It is prevailing evil. Baya Ray, hi, thanks for being, you're a new viewer. Should the Russian government put ethnic Russians first and foremost, or should you focus on
Not absolutely, not any kind of privileges for Russian ethnic. I am purely ethnically Russian, so I think we need no special privileges. Our ethical and moral standards of normal Russia is to be open to the other, to include the other, not exclude, not to be put over them. So our heart. And if we want to have justice for us Russians, our justice is the freedom to accept and embrace the other. So we are not in any sense mixophobic. We are just open society. Inside of Russian, not open society in the liberal individual aspect. We Russians, we accept the other. We integrate the other. We leave the other live with us, not mixing or mixing, on entering or not entering, and that is our imperial attitude. So in that way we have constructed so huge country. We didn't impose ourselves over the other. We are not conquerors. We just the friends and integrator of great Eurasian space, and that is the part of our identity. If you want to make our nationalism smaller, if you want to divide us from this global expansion of our spirit, you will reduce us to something not Russian.
But is that a good idea? Because if you think about being inclusive, it's a lovely word. The word is beautiful, but it can cause corruption. If you think about Sweden has been so open to these Islamic people, refugees, and their women are getting raped. They're getting bashed. The statistics are horrible. So you have to be inclusive but with restriction, right? You have to be smart about it, correct?
The difference is that the Islamic people that we have, or the people of other ethnic groups that we have in Russia, they lived here for centuries. They are part of our culture. In Sweden, they came just now. That is artificial process. And they came to Sweden and to Europe. I'm against this immigration, not only because of Europeans, but because of immigrants as well. They are losing their identities. They don't accept new identity from the Western culture, and they're losing their own identities. So that is a murderous process for both, from immigrants and for the people living there from the century, because liberalism destroys cultural identity, and Russia tries to preserve this identity and to integrate the other with some demands. And there is not huge flow of immigrants in Russia outside of the territories that always, or many ages, were the part of our living space. So they are natural. They are not other. They are not strangers. They are
natural. They are natural today, because the Tatar that you have living in, what is it, Chechnya? Is that where the Tatar are all? They were originally Turkish, but once upon a time they invaded. Correct?
No, Chechens are not Turkish. There are many different ethnic groups. So they are living some centuries under with Russian in the same empire before. In the Genghis Khan time, in the Golden Horde time, there was the common state with domination of the Turkish nation. After that, there was domination of the Russian Tsars. But that was the same space, in balanced, very balanced. So they are not strangers to us. We all are Eurasian, the part of Eurasia. Has basically moved term limits. Yes, that is. I read the question.
You've read the question already. Sorry, that's Kane Adamson. Hello, thank you for coming on today.
So the question is about Putin, that has basically removed term limits for his presidency by changing the rules around presidential term limits. So that is a little bit complicated. Normally, or generally, I am in favor of Putin as not only as a president, but as well as a Tsar, as authoritarian. It has nothing against authoritarian rule, neither of Putin nor of maybe the other figure. But now that it is, I have explained already that in Russia we have the people, elite, and Putin. Putin is balancing between people and elite. And now people saw in him during 20 years a kind of representative of the people itself, something like a kind of the agent on the top of the hierarchy, agent of the people, acting in favor of the people. For the Russian identity. And partly that was so, and that is so, but partly Putin has made many compromises with the elite. He balances, and he balanced before between elites, that is anti-Russian, liberal and globalist, and people, that is obviously Russian and mostly illiberal. And last time Putin could not keep anymore this balance. Elites insists to influence him, and there is the growing disappointment in the people of the politics of Putin. Putin was considered to be strong, and he was loved as such. Now he is becoming as weaker, much weaker than before, and when he is losing his popularity and his support in the masses. So now he tries to confirm his presidency in a purely political, administrative way, and that provokes rather disappointment. So before, everybody would like to Putin forever, but when he is coming too much to the demands of the elite, that is anti-social, anti-Russian. So he is losing this popular support. That is very special turn. So we we demanded of him to become Tsar, and he declined. Now, when nobody demands him more to become Tsar, it's too late. He declares himself a Tsar, but it is a little bit out of time. So it is anachronistic, I would say. That creates a kind of paradox.
Yes.
So there is the question: what is your greatest wish in life?
What is your greatest wish? Yeah.
So it's difficult to say. Maybe that is very, very personal question.
Oh, then don't answer if it's personal. It's okay. We can move to the next question.
But my wish it is to continue my fight until the end, not to deviate from my what I consider to be my mission on the earth. So the most dangerous thing for me it is to deviate somehow, maybe by some circumstances, from accomplishing what I consider to be my mission. That's my mission. To stay strong until the end.
Good. You're a strong fighter. What is the solution to the problem of the liberal elites? Is there a solution to it?
Yes, total destruction, eradication.
Pure eradication, hey? Let's have a look here. Jim Bowden. I want to make sure it's not a bad question. Okay. Mr. Dugin, or Dr. Dugin, your opinion/view on Alain de Benoit, who is your friend. And actually, I emailed him, but he hasn't responded. I don't think he wants me to interview him. And Dr. Tom Sunik. To what? Sunik?
Sunic. He is Croat.
Oh, okay. Sunic.
Russian.
Croatia. To what extent do you agree/disagree with their political views and why? You agree a lot with Alain de Benoit, don't you?
Yes. Tomislav Sunic and Alain de Benoit, they are my friends. We belong more or less to the same, almost in all details, the same tendency. We are against liberalism. We are in favor of the people. And interesting that we Russians, we are supporting mostly Serbian, they are closer to us. And it is important that with Tomislav Sunic, we have many points in common. In spite of the fact he is the partisan of strong Croatia identity. So that is the sign that we could make friendship and the ties outside of the national disagreements between historically societies. So that is the example. Our friendship with Tomislav Sunic is the example how we could overcome national boundaries in order to have the same principle of pluralism and multipolarity and forced political theory. And to say I'm Orthodox Christian, Alain de Benoit is rather pagan. He is in favor of paganism, but I see him in some points much more closer than with Western Christians. So he is one of my best friends. He has influenced my position in many aspects. So I recognize him as one of the teacher and the masters. And to say the truth, I agree with him almost on everything with Alain.
Okay. Let's have a look. Sorry, I lost my spot where I was and now I can't find it. How much time do you have? Are you able to say?
10 minutes, maybe, something like
10 minutes. Okay, all right. I'm sorry. Okay, so sorry, a lot of people have a lot of questions and I don't want to, sorry, I forgot where I was up to. This is my friend Johnny. Hi, Aleksandr, I like your work and I think it's interesting. If I may ask, what do you think about the currently increasing progressive politics and atheism in the West from a Russian perspective?
I think that interesting that now in the world there is a kind of third stage of modernization. Third stage, that modernity began from with Galilei, with Newton, with Cartesian thought, René Descartes, and that was the first stage. There was the second stage during 20th century of this modernization, with coming of the new technology and transformation, and now we are living in the third stage. And all these three stages of the modernity were against the God, against church, against tradition, against roots, against sacredness. All that was the stage of desacralization, disenchantment of the world. And now in the third stage, everything that was not cleansed by the modernity and that belong to the rests of the pre-modern world in the religion and the culture and a way of behavior and thinking, all that should be cleansed now. So there is this new wave or last wave of metaphysical cleansing. So the liberalism, the modernity is cleansing, raising all the rests of the pre-modern society. That is finalization of the eradication process, and that is third stage will end logically by annihilation of humanity and replacement, the great replacement of the humans by post-humans entities, beings, and cyborgs, artificial intelligence, and this fantastic films and series we are watching now, they are preparing us to post-human realities that will be the end, because there could not be the religion or tradition or the sacredness for the machines. So we are in the process of being finally totally replaced by post-human species, and that is the third stage of the modernity, because the modernity is genocide, organized genocide from the beginning. That is anti-human, because when the people have killed the god, they have killed themselves. That was the suicide. When the people loses the transcendental dimension in favor of the immanent life, that in that very moment this immanent life is finished. So because the god is our source of life, and without him we are as good as dead. And as good as dead now is literally what is happened. So what happens? We are going to die literally as humanity, not as persons.
It's a reality.
It is the reality, and that is a logical result of the progress, or so-called material progress, of modernity.
Yes. Vival, what are your views on Lebensraum?
Interesting. There is an error, a grammatical error, because in German it is Lebensraum. Lebensraum is the space of life, and Lebensraum, it is the space of love. So Liebesraum or Lebensraum, I think the question is about geopolitical concept of a space of life rather than the space of love. So my opinion, my view on Lebensraum, it is interesting that Haushofer, who has introduced this concept in geopolitics, thought not so much about the space to live on or to live in, but space as living being, as the space as organical entity. So that is the kind of sentient being, the space and as sentient being that is involved in the history of the people. So that the reality of the space on concrete space with mountains, with rivers, with desert, defines somehow the culture and the destiny of the civilization or society that are embedded in this living space. So that is very interesting organicist concept, starting from Ratzel, from German organicist school. And we are today we're speaking about Lebensraum as the space of the possible imperialist expansion, something quantitative. And I prefer to interpret this concept in the qualitative way.
Port Film Co-op, Mr. Dugin, what do you think of the Soviet-era filmmaker Andrei Tarkovsky, sorry, in particular his films Andrei Rublev, Mira, and
Stalker. They are very beautiful films, and I recommend to see them. They are classics, classical films for us. And above all, I think Andrei Rublev is a kind of insight.
Thanks, Dark Helmet.
Insight in Russian spirituality. It is because it is about the painter of the icons, traditional Andrei Rublev. If you want to understand better Russian soul, I recommend you to see the films of Tarkovsky. He is very beautiful and very famous as well as filmmaker.
That's good. I can't find the question, but someone sent me a question that's not on camera, and his question is something about. Hang on, let me find it. Something about Ukrainians being exterminated. Like, what are your thoughts on the Ukrainians being exterminated? I think that's.
It is a long history that demands entering in details. I'm in favor of unification of Russia and Ukraine on the basis of the common historical destiny. I think that Ukrainians are Ukrainians are the Western Russians. Western Russians, we are Eastern Russians. So, and Belarusians are as well the part of the Western Russians, the other. I never pretended to exterminate nobody, including Ukrainians. So, my word about necessity to punish the perpetrator of the criminal act of killing the people in Odessa were misinterpreted and put in the political propaganda. So I never demanded to exterminate nobody. Above all, I'm myself partly Ukrainian, so I could not be.
Oh,
yes, because almost all Russians, Ukraine is not the nation; it is the Western Russian. We are so mixed. So we could not say it is about the choice, what we prefer to be considered, whether Russians, Eastern Russians, or Great Russians. Eastern Russian, it's Great Russian. Western Russian, that is whether White Russians as Belarusians or Little Russians as Ukrainians. So this conflict, a bloody conflict between Ukraine and Russia, it is results of political manipulation, and that is geopolitical tragedy for all of us. That is the civil war, and consider that to be civil war. And I have my camp in favor of new Russians and unification between Ukraine and Great Russia, but mostly the Ukrainian nationalists are against this project, and they're in favor of Soros. And now they've elected Jewish clown Zelensky. He's Jewish and clown. It is not. It is not.
You're allowed to say that. He hasn't affected.
Not blaming. He is clown because he worked many years as one of the stand-up comics.
He's not really a comedian. Okay.
Comedian.
Clown,
he's comedian. Comedian. He is profession.
Yes.
It is not my appreciation or my.
No, I understand.
And he is Jewish because he says I am Jewish comedian. And it might be Jewish. It's perfect comedian. Perfect. How Ukrainian nationalists consider it all right with them to fight against Russian, serious Slavic Indo-European Russian, to have Jewish comedian. Maybe that was the reason of their nationalist revolt. It's up to them to decide. Are they happy with that or not? It's up to them to decide. But I have in this civil war with in the Western Russia my camp and my preferences. But it is very very delicate topics. So what do you think about the progression? Interesting about Hungary and Poland.
Yeah, they're doing good.
So you know that Hungary and Poland, being two Eastern European countries, they had many pretensions and objections against us, against the Great Russians. They blamed us to be conquerors, to be colonizers, and we really behaved ourselves like that in the past. So I could not deny that sometimes great Russians, we were imperialists. That is true, and they have all the reason to have some claim, some pretensions, some accusations against us that are historically correct. But at the same time, what is interesting, so being not at all pro-Russian, neither Hungarians nor Polish people, now they're becoming more and more anti-Western, not because of our influence, but because of discovery that their traditional values, their identities, Hungarian and Polish, are incompatible with the identity of modern, liberal, anti-national, politcorrect Europe. So now they are closing to us not by geopolitical reasons, because there are contradictions and oppositions rather than natural relations between Russia and Eastern Europe, but they are coming to the same conclusion, to the same rejection of the Western liberalism by different way and by different logic, embedded in their own identity. So that is interesting case that we are objective, defending tradition and rejecting the modern and postmodern liberalism. We are not following only our own Russian agenda. Our competitors in the Eastern Europe do just the same. Do just the same, but totally different reasons. So that is very important testimony, I think, in that. So I support very much this awakening of the Polish and Hungarian and Eastern European identity, and in spite of being blamed to be Russian imperialist, my works are very, very much read in Hungary and in Poland. Many books of mine are translated in these languages. In spite of the traditional confrontation between our countries. So I am in favor of the awakening of the national identity, including in the cases when this awakening could produce a kind of rise of anti-Russian elements. So we need to follow the principle, not only national interests. So defense of tradition should be really, really multipolar, and we should be in favor of restoration of the tradition and sacred values, including in the cases when it could represent somehow a threat or danger for us. So that is the question of the principle, and I'm trying to follow that correctly.
Yeah, okay. We'll make this the last question because I know you said 10 minutes.
Okay.
So, Reg, my friend Reg, are you happy that Russia got its Christmas gift in 1991 when the communist flag is now off the flagpole and replaced by the real Russian flag? P.S. Communism sucks.
I think that was the great strategy. I think quite opposite. I think that I was always the radical enemy of the communism. Because I was a traditionalist from my early youth, and the beginning and the end of the 70s. Starting from end of the 70s, I was anti-Soviet, and I have translated Evola, and I really organically hated Soviet government, and that lasted just until the 91. When I have seen this wave of the pro-Western liberals overcoming old and senile and totally stupid communists, but they have created something worse. And that moment, in the 2021, I have discovered that there could exist the things worse than communism that I hated. That was the liberalism. So that was a very, very important shift. So I think that the change of the flag, coinciding with the end of our empire, of the Russian Empire, because Soviet Union was the last edition of this Russian Empire, was the big tragedy and the compensation of the flag with all these pro-Western globalist liberals. That was precisely humiliation for us. That was a great tragedy. Being enemy of communism, and I reject radically atheism, materialism, and Marxism, but I think that the socialism was much more Russian than the liberalism that followed in the 90s. In spite of some science, the symbols and science, they were devoid of the reality. They were just decoration behind which there was the Antichrists in the liberalism, in the form and the guise of liberalism. That is my reading of the recent Russian history.
Well, thank you so much. I'm really sorry to everyone in the audience that wanted more of your questions answered. Maybe you can come back another time and they can
let's try. Yes.
Yeah, let's try that. Okay. Well, before we go, I forgot to read a Bible verse, which I always do at the start. But I'm just going to quickly finish the live stream with a Bible verse instead of starting it. So I hope that's okay with everyone. I chose Isaiah chapter 40, verse 31. But those who hope in the Lord will renew their strength. They will soar on wings like eagles. They will run and not grow weary. They will walk and not be faint. So I think that's the best place to leave it. I hope everyone has had a good time and everyone enjoyed the stream. I would love to bring you back if I wasn't too scary for you, because you're talking probably to the scariest girl in Australia, and I'm talking to the scariest philosopher. So we're both scary.
Okay, best wishes.
Okay, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. All right, guys, I'm going to end the stream now. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Stream.